What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the list of new releases that I plan on covering in terms of video game reviews for the upcoming year that is 2026, which, as with every year, at the beginning we're all filled with hope about how it's going to go for various releases, and obviously we'll see how that plays out for the course of it. In my case, at least, when you're actually planning on reviewing a bunch of video games, I've found it very helpful to get a sort of game plan, at least in terms of what is going to be releasing that I know for a fact I will want to cover. But as you would probably expect right here at the beginning of the year, that does come with a few caveats. That being, things that I'm not going to review, things that we don't have dates for, stuff that is inevitably going to get revealed during this year and also release. And to be honest with you, maybe something I've just overlooked. That happens too sometimes. But to be a little more specific, first and foremost, I am not including early access titles here. That is pretty simply because I don't review games that are in early access. If a game happens to enter into early access and then also release this year, then there is a chance I may well review it. But barring that, it's not going to happen. And so while I will cover those games almost certainly with stuff like Celasta 2 as an example, unless that also releases, there won't be a full-blown review for it. Another thing I wanted to throw out there is a couple of games that I know people may well ask me about that I am not currently planning a review for one reason or another, but to give you the short list there, Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is releasing, and I think it's February. This is a maybe for me right now. I'm not super familiar with the entirety of the Dragon Quest series. This is of interest to me, but it's also releasing on, I think, like the same day as two other games that I very much want to play more than that, so I might make time for it if it looks interesting later in the year, but I have no plans at the beginning of it. Even sooner than that, however, here in about 2 weeks, we are getting the latest entry to the Trails in the Sky series, from what I understand. Trails Beyond the Horizon, I think it's called. As it stands, I have only just started dabbling in that series. I have literally played the first remake, and so while I might take a look at that game just to, kind of get the other end of the series in terms of how that's doing mechanically speaking, that kind of thing, I have no plans for a full-blown review there. And then lastly, GTA 6, that is not coming to PC straight away. This is a PC channel, and so that's kind of a no-go for me pretty much immediately. I may well take a look at it in the future, but until they decide to release it on PC, I genuinely do not care. Especially since I'm not really super into GTA as a franchise anyways, so it's just not something I care much about. Moving on from there, however, let's talk about a few games that I think are potentially going to release in 2026, but are not games that currently either have a set release date or we just don't really know much about. For instance, Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy. I think it is very possible that might get a late release this year. It's just also not for sure. Owlcat has not released any sort of release date or window for that. They just recently released the alpha for it, which is a lot of fun, but just as it stands, I simply do not know. And that's pretty much also the case for things like Lords of the Fallen 2, the follow-up to the sort of rebooted, not exactly rebooted, but second Lords of the Fallen title, which gets confusing fast, I guess. But I'll check that out if it releases. And then Star Wars Zero Company, an upcoming TRPG set in the Star Wars universe. There's very little information on that game, but I keep seeing people thinking it's going to maybe come out in 2026, so we'll see. And then lastly, the Trails in the Sky second chapter remake. We know that's supposed to be coming in 2026 sometime, but no date or a word on any of that yet. So kind of waiting to see on that front, but once we have more information, I'm likely to cover that. Now, I think that covered probably most of the important bases in terms of stuff we just don't have clear answers on, and so if there's something I missed that you want to know about, just drop a comment about it. I'll more than likely reply to you. From there, let's actually get into the meat of the video with some various games that I will be reviewing, and we even have dates for most of them. First up, we've got Banquet For Fools, an upcoming CRPG releasing on January 23rd. It's been in early access for quite some time. I've made a few videos about it. It's looking especially promising. I enjoy the very odd nature of the world and things. The only thing I don't know about this game is if I will be reviewing it right as it releases or not. Once I get acquainted with the release version of it, I'll kind of make a decision at that point whether or not I want to go ahead and fully go through it or not, as opposed to just like an initial video. But as is the case with these, like indie CRPGs, sometimes you just have to play those by ear a little bit in terms of actually trying to do everything that they offer. But one way or another, this one will be getting a review. Now, on February 5th, we see the release of Nioh 3, latest installment to the Nioh franchise, of course. I really enjoyed the first two. I think it's some of Team Ninja's best work, in fact. And while they've made some forays into other spaces within like the Souls-like type of genre, Nioh in particular is the one I'm most interested to see how they advance that formula, because I think it is, of all of their work, the franchise that feels the most unique to them specifically. And I believe they're even supposed to have a demo available at some point. They've had one available on, I think it's PlayStation, for quite some time, but I believe they are intending to bring that demo to PC before the launch, but we'll see what happens either way. Following on from that, on February 13th, we see the release of High on Life 2. That's going to be a bit of a tricky one. I know I want to review this, but it has an incredibly raunchy sense of humor, and you would be forgiven for not realizing that I've reviewed the first one, because it's one of the only videos that YouTube has ever demonetized on my end. Reason being, of course, the very mature content at play, and again, YouTube is just really harping on that stuff lately. So I'm going to do my best to review High on Life 2. I think the only thing that would prohibit me from actually doing it is if I have to cut it down to the point where the review is just no longer representative of what the game is. In that specific instance, I might just have to give it a mulligan, I guess, but I will be doing my best to review this one. We'll see what ultimately happens with it, unfortunately, but that does push us into March 1st with Mouse PI. One of the first games to try to cash in on the public domain version of Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, I think it was, that very early version of Mickey going into the public domain. Mouse PI seems to be trying to capitalize on that in particular. This one just looks like a bit of silly sort of boomer shooter fun, and it looks like it's going to be a nice little, I would say, break in everything else I'm going to be doing at the time, and I'm not expecting anything revolutionary here. Mostly just looking to play this one to have some fun. But that does bring us to, on the exact same day, Crimson Desert. Crimson Desert is, of course, from Pearl Abyss, the same people behind like Black Desert Online as an example, and Crimson Desert, being a single-player experience, looks to be going all in on like a lot of the flashy elements of combat and stuff, as well as promising to bring you this big open world to explore, and I'm curious to see mostly if they can actually deliver on the things they are promising, because if so, I think it'll be a great game, but there's a lot of places this one could go sideways, and we'll ultimately see what happens. Now, as far as stuff I'm planning to review that actually has a set-in-stone release date, that's pretty much it. Everything after that is much harder to gauge, mostly because we either have a quarter or just a general 2026 release window outside of Phantom Blade Zero all the way in September. So on September 8th, we see the release of Phantom Blade Zero, another flashy action game that I enjoy every so often throughout the year, but they've actually decided to bring this one to PC straight away, which was not initially the case, so I was happy to see that personally. Looks good though, might struggle to stand out in terms of just like the type of game it is ultimately, but we'll see where it lands. Now, sometime in Q1, we are supposed to be getting Esoteric Ebb. This is a Disco Elysium-like set in D&D 5e rules, actually. You take on the role of a cleric, be they good or bad, as you seek to move through what is mostly a narrative adventure, but kind of presented as like a D&D one-shot where you're trying to get to the bottom of some mysteries. It has a demo available for people to play. I enjoyed that demo a lot. It's worth checking out if you're curious, but that is supposed to be releasing this year finally. I'll definitely be taking a look at it. Also in Q1 sometime, we should be seeing the release of the Gothic Remake. As somebody who came to the Gothic series quite late, but wound up playing all of them because I enjoyed them so much, I'm very much so looking forward to what they wind up doing with a reimagined version of the original Gothic, because the original Gothic is a really good game, even if it's very old and clunky. So I'm hoping this will just bring more people to it. Another CRPG meant to be releasing in 2026 is Way of Wrath. It was initially due out last year, but was unsurprisingly pushed to 2026 then, and the Way of Wrath puts you in the leadership position of a tribe who's going to be fighting off a pending invasion, and your job is basically to just go about the different ways you can prepare for that invasion and try to survive it and everything. It's a really interesting premise, and I'm curious to see if they can pull it off. I've had my eye on this one for quite some time. Also in 2026, we are supposed to be getting Mortal Shell 2, an upcoming Souls-like that sees you bouncing around different bodies, or shells if you prefer, that you then awaken, possess, and they all have like their strengths and abilities, and you kind of do Souls-like combat with that. People have always recommended the first one to me. I've heard it was pretty good, and I'm actually just going to be jumping straight into the second one more than likely with this. Then we've got Onimusha, Way of the Sword, also out in 2026 sometime, apparently. I'm actually curious about this one because I was never like super into this particular franchise myself, but I do remember being a kid and watching one of my older brothers play it a lot with his friends, or, you know, the Onimusha series as a whole, and I'm kind of just curious to see what it's like these days. But I'd be lying if I said I remembered much of it previously, so we'll see how it lands, I guess. Then we've got Beast of Reincarnation. This is that sort of odd title that is apparently from Game Freak, the same people who made Pokemon of all things, look to be finally doing something different, so it'll be curious just to see how that lands generally, especially given that it's an action RPG. You seem to have a companion in the form of a large wolf. Other than that, a bit mysterious at the moment. Then we've got Valor Mortis, an upcoming first-person Souls-like, or at least it's attempting to be one. This game had a playtest very recently, certainly showed some promise from what I experienced, but there were some things that could stand to be tightened up, that kind of thing. So hopefully they get a lot of good feedback from that playtest and can bring that forward into the full release, which is supposed to be due out sometime this year. But, you know, if you thought Mortem wasn't going to jump in and check out Valor Mortis, you are very incorrect. In a very, very different tone, however, we then have No Ghosts at the Grand is supposed to be out this year as well. No Ghosts at the Grand is like a musical sort of like renovation game where you're fixing up this hotel, the Grand, but there's also a mystery around this town and stuff. There's exploration bits. This is another game with a public demo if you kind of want to see it for yourself. And it's another game I'll likely be playing just as a bit of a breather from all the deeper RPGs and everything along the way, which is hardly a bad thing. And then, saving some of the best for last here, we've got Control Resonant due out sometime this year as well. I am hoping I can get to Alan Wake 1 and 2 before it actually winds up releasing. I have played the original Control, which I liked a lot, and I'm curious to see the follow-up. But I know they've been really trying to tie that stuff in with the Alan Wake franchise as well, so just for like full context, I would like to get through both of those before then. We'll see what happens there, but that is currently the goal, at least. And then lastly, The Blood of Dawnwalker, a bloody tale set in 14th century Europe that's going to be trying to do some interesting things with the time mechanic that I am especially keen to see the ultimate result of at the end of the day, and that's enough reason for me to check it out in and of itself. However, this being from previous CDPR devs as well is, of course, intriguing. And while I think there are certainly some points where this one could potentially flounder a bit, I am interested in seeing if they manage to pull it off, just because I enjoy the tone, the setting, some of the general ideas, and, you know, hopefully they manage to make it work. But as it stands, I would say that is everything new release that we know about right here at the beginning of the year that I could think of that I will almost certainly be covering and kind of have scheduled for. Once again, if there's anything you think I missed or you're just curious about, by all means, drop a comment about it. I should let you know one way or the other. There's also obviously going to be stuff that we just don't know about right now that will come later, and I will obviously slot that in where appropriate. And then following on from this video in either tomorrow or maybe the day after that, I will have another video talking about the old titles, the stuff that is already released that I'm going to plan to try to get around to this year as well. But for now, I think that should pretty well do it. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe if you're looking forward to any of these particular reviews. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.